Hello everyone, bringing you a video today looking at this. Now this is an example of an ersatz pattern, British Great War water bottle. So it's one of multiple ersatz versions of the water bottle which were brought in to supplement the standard enamel felt covered water bottle that we're all familiar with. This is the Canadian pattern in aluminium, referred to as the Canadian pattern. They were manufactured in Canada, which is something we'll have a look at in just a minute. And you'll already be thinking, those who are familiar with US military kit will already be probably comparing this to the M1910 canteen. It is very similar, and we're going to have a look at it in comparison to the M1910 canteen in the video, talk a little bit more about how it differed in design, though obviously presumably influenced by. This is one of the few things I have in my collection which is in relic condition. If we have a look at the back here, you can see, but certainly from the front it doesn't look too bad. Some fairly serious dings and an interesting impact mark on the bottom there, which corresponds with this hole on the back, which I'm not entirely sure what's caused that, but an interesting piece of damage to it anyway. As I say, one of the few things in my collection which is in relic condition, but finding these in good condition is very, very unusual, and even finding them in relic condition is not that common. So it's nice to have one of these in the collection. Anyway, without further ado, we'll get into the main part of the video and talk about this in a little bit more detail. So here we have the water bottle, and we'll just give this a turn around so you can look at the manufacturing details and so forth and look at the damage that it has sustained. As I say, this is an ersatz form of water bottle. It was designed, introduced to allow other manufacturers to come in and produce water bottles for the British Army, partly due, well, a large part due to the sheer size of the British Army. Once recruitment was stepped up after the beginning of the Great War, it was realised that the regular army was going to be far too small to engage in the sort of warfare that was developing, particularly on the Western Front, and to equip the huge volunteer army that was raised was going to be a real problem. There were various issues, not only training, which is the big one that people think about, and obviously the results of the army entering the field when it was argued by some that it wasn't really ready are well recorded. But equipping them was a major problem as well. So you would see things like the introduction of leather equipment, the 1914 pattern leather equipment, when the British Army had been using webbing equipment for quite some time. And then the introduction of the economy version of the service dress jacket, and water bottles of various different patterns. And this is one of those. As I say, it is Canadian pattern, made in aluminium. You can see it has a single welded seam where the top has been formed and then welded onto the bottom. If we look at the bottom here, you can see there's a nice clear stamp on this, and you can see these were made by Canadian Aluminium Goods Supply Company Limited, and this one is dated 1914. So that's a nice clear stamp in the bottom there, which is nice to have. Nice that that's still intact and very visible. Ostensibly it looks like the US M1910 canteen, but it is quite different in its dimensions. If we bring an M1910 in from the side there, you can see that there's quite a bit greater capacity. If we look at the bottom profile in particular, this doesn't taper down in the same way that the M1910 bottle does. From the shoulder here, the M1910 bottle tapers down, partly so that it will fit in the M1910 cup. So obviously this nests together with a cup, which was a very advanced design for the time. The British bottle doesn't do that. This is designed to be covered, and indeed they were covered in felt, in the same way that the enamel water bottles were. So you'd have felt up to the spout here. There are photographs of an example with the majority of the cover still remaining available on Khaki Web, which is an excellent website, and I'll put a link down below in the description or in a pinned comment where you can go and have a look at that to see what these looked like when they were actually in use. It uses a cork stopper as opposed to a screw cap. You can see there is no screw worked into the neck of the bottle here. There's just a little lip, little rim, and you'd have a cork stopper in there. Same principle, but a little bit bigger than those used in the enamelled water bottles, purely because the neck is slightly larger. But the principle of that is exactly the same. So a cork stopper on a bit of cord, rather than anything fancy. Obviously, US. This is a 1945 dated M1910 bottle, just to be clear. Quite a late production aluminium example. Obviously, Great War, they had a metal cap as well, but otherwise the same. It serves the purpose here of comparing the two. As I say, these are very much an ersatz pattern. They do show up quite, well, they don't show up a huge amount in photographs and so forth, but quite large numbers of them were made, and there are odd bits of footage and photographs out there which do show them in use, and quite commonly with 1914 pattern leather equipment. Obviously that makes sense because they were produced for the same reason, and therefore most likely be provided to the same troops. As I say, it's an interesting design. It's one that not many people necessarily know about. And there are other patterns as well, which hopefully I'll talk about in future videos. But this is just one example of the sort of diversity in manufacturing that had to be introduced to equip the volunteer army that Britain raised during the Great War. I also covered this a little bit in the video where I talked about clasp knives, where various different patterns of clasp knives were approved during the course of the war to ensure that supplies were maintained. Obviously, standardisation has to give way in wartime to some degree to accommodate manufacturers who perhaps can't manufacture the standard patterns of equipment that the army requires. Another good example of that is obviously the modifications to web equipment that's seen during the Second World War, where different methods of manufacturing were introduced to allow other companies to come in and start manufacturing components of web equipment who couldn't produce items using the standard methods. So there it is. As I say, just a quick comparison of the two. I'll just turn these around again so you can compare the size and the shape of the two of them. You can see that the British bottle is slightly bigger, well, Canadian-made British bottle is slightly bigger. And I'll just bring this up to the camera again, just turn it around so you can see the various details. Obviously we have hefty dings in the front here and quite a lot of corrosion. But there it is. A bottle water aluminium Canadian pattern.
I hope you found it interesting looking at that, as I always say. If you have and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the little notification button down below. And that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you'd really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.